Some people fish for fish, others fish for thoughts. Today I was thinking about something, a small parable about a fisherman. He woke up early every day, went to the lake, prepared the rod, but he never cast the line. He said it wasn't the right moment yet. He waited for the wind to die down, waited for the sun to rise a bit higher, waited for the water to get calmer. When the wind stopped, he thought it might be better to wait until late afternoon. When the afternoon arrived, he said that the next day the fishing would be better. And so he spent hours by the lake with everything ready, but without ever casting the line. And one day someone asked, "Didn't you come to fish?" And he replied, "I did, but I'm waiting for the ideal moment." And perhaps we do something similar with life. There is this silent feeling that living will start later. After something ends, after something improves, after we are more ready, we think, when I have more time, when I resolve this, when I am more tranquil, when everything aligns, and without noticing, the present becomes just an interval, a place of passage, as if life were always right there, a little bit ahead. You wake up, but you already wake up thinking about what comes next. You resolve things waiting for the moment when you will be able to relax. You plan, imagining when you will finally see with more calm that there is always this silent promise. In the future, it will be different. In the future, I will breathe better. I might enjoy it more. I know, I will be more present. But the curious thing is that this future, it never arrives exactly as we imagine, because when it arrives, it has already become now. So, without noticing, the mind creates another after, another ideal moment, another point further ahead, like the fisherman by the lake, with everything ready, waiting just a little longer. And meanwhile, the water it continues moving, the wind it goes passing, the light it changes, the day advances, and perhaps life is exactly this that happens while we wait for the right moment to start living, because there is no clear signal, and nor will there exist a perfect instant marked as that ideal moment. There exists only a lake, exactly as it is now, and sometimes the only thing missing is to cast the line. But there exists something curious, which is that even when we cast the line, the mind, it continues looking forward, because it is not only about starting, it is about this constant sensation that something better is to come. We don't only wait for a moment to start living, we wait for a moment in which living will get easier, clearer, more complete, as if there were a point in time in which everything finally organizes itself. And this creates a kind of silent promise that in the future, I will be more tranquil. I will understand better. I will live with more presence without noticing. The future begins to function as an imaginary place where life happens in a more intense way. If we take as an example Kierkegaard, he said that the human being, he lives exactly between these two tensions, what has already been and what is not yet. And many times this second part occupies more space because the future, it seems to have infinite possibilities. It is open, it is flexible. You can fill the future with promises. Already the present, it seems very small, limited, too concrete, I would say. So the mind does something almost automatic. It projects meaning forward. Heidegger, he described this as a fundamental characteristic of existence. We are always thrown in the direction of what has not yet happened, always anticipating ourselves. But there exists a silent consequence in this. When everything is lived as preparation, the present, your present, it loses density. It becomes just a bridge, an interval between the now and the after. You do something thinking about what will come, resolve a stage imagining the next, terminate the day waiting for the following. And the curious thing is that this promise, it never fulfills itself totally, because when the future arrives, it does not come as the future, it comes as now. And the now carries the same uncertainties, the same questions even, and even the same movements. So, what does our mind do? It creates another after, another point ahead. It is like walking around a lake, thinking that at the next curve the landscape will be finally perfect, but at each curve it reveals only more lake. Nothing changes in a radical way, but something inside of us continues waiting. The problem is that we treat life as if it were a destination, when it is more similar to a process, like a song that does not need to reach the end to be felt. Each note by itself, it already makes part of the experience. And perhaps the problem is not imagining the future, but believing that life it is stored in it, because meanwhile the wind it continues passing, the water it will continue moving, and the day will continue advancing. The sensation of living, it continues happening only in one place, the here. And even so, we continue looking forward, as if there were something more important right in the ahead, something that finally will bring the sensation that we arrived. But there exists a detail that I think is almost imperceptible in all of this. The future, it never presents itself as future, and this changes everything because that which you imagined when finally happens, it does not have the same form that it had in your mind. You think of a more tranquil moment, it arrives, but along with it come new questions. You imagine more time, it appears, but it is filled by other things. The horizon, it shifts. It is almost as if you were in a boat in the middle of a lake, rowing in direction to a point where the water seems calmer. But when you arrive, you perceive that the surface it continues moving, not because something went wrong, but because the lake it never was still. Saint Augustine, he wrote something very cool about time. He said that the future it does not exist. What exists is only the expectation of the future lived in the present. In other words, when we think about tomorrow, we are thinking in the now. When we imagine what will come, this also is happening now, because the future is always a construction of the present. And this creates a paradox, kind of silent, because we live waiting for something that can only be lived when it already turned now. You wait for the end of a phase, it arrives, and already is no longer the future that you imagined. You wait for a moment of clarity, it appears, but soon it dissolves into new questions. Not because life it is denying you this moment, but because life it does not fix itself. One of the reflections that I think most fits for this would be from Heraclitus, when he says that nobody enters the same river twice, because the water it is always changing, and who enters also changes. And perhaps with time it is exactly like that. We never arrive in the same future because it never is the same. This can generate a sensation quite curious, that of being always a little before, always on the way, always in direction of something that has not yet arrived. But what if this sensation it is not an error? And what if it is only the mode how the mind functions? Because the mind it creates lines, points of arrival, ideal moments, but the experience it is not linear. It is more similar to the water of this lake. There does not exist a point where the water it finally stabilizes. It is always in motion, and perhaps what we call arriving is only an instant in which we stop rowing. But this instant, it is not in the future. It can only happen now. There exists a simple story that manages to summarize a bit of this, which is about a man who wanted to cross a lake. He built a boat, he entered the water, he started to row, and during the whole way he thought of the other side. He imagined how it would be, how he was going to feel when he finally arrived. But what happens? In the middle of the crossing, something started to call his attention. The reflection of the light on the water, the soft sound of the movement, the wind passing, and for a moment he perceived that he was already in the lake, not only crossing, but living the crossing. The other side continued existing, but stopped being the only focus. and perhaps the future, it functions a bit like that. It continues there, but it does not need to carry all the sense of life, because while we wait, the crossing, it is happening. The sounds exist, the details they appear, the experience it forms itself, and many times what we call life is not at the point of arrival, but in this silent movement, in your rowing of the day-to-day, in your observing, in your perceiving. The future, it never arrives because it is not a place, it is only a direction. And the direction is not something that you reach, it is something that you travel. Exactly like this man inside the boat, who at some moment perceived that there does not exist another place more alive than exactly where he is. And there exists a silent effect when this idea, it starts to mature. It is not immediate, and it does not happen at once. It is almost as if the time it stopped being a race and passed to be something that simply happens. You continue doing the same things, the days they continue full, the responsibilities, they will not disappear, but something changes in the form, how you move inside of this. Before, there was always a sensation that something important was ahead. Now, this urgency, it diminishes, not because you gave up on plans, but because you perceive that they do not carry that weight of starting to live. You already started. There exists a light difference between preparing life and living while preparing. This difference is small, almost invisible, but it changes the experience. The time it stops being an enemy that needs to be reached and passes to be a space where you are. You perceive that you do not need to wait for a lighter day for you to breathe better, nor an ideal moment for you to observe, nor a perfect phase for you to feel finally the presence. Everything this can happen in the middle of what already is happening now. And it is curious because the mind, she always believed that living fully demanded specific conditions: silence, free time, clarity. But the experience, she shows something different. The presence, she appears in the middle of the noise, in the middle of the tasks, in the middle of the movement. You are walking and suddenly perceive your own step. You are resolving something and notice the sound around. You can be in a common day and something call your attention. It is not because the day changed, but because you changed the form of being in it. Psychological suffering is born in great part from this constant escape from the present, from the attempt of living always in another moment. But when this escape it diminishes, there does not emerge an explosive happiness. There emerges something much simpler, a silent lightness. It is almost as if the mind, she stopped pushing the experience forward, almost as if an instant it stopped being an obstacle. It passed to be the place itself. And this does not mean living without thinking about the future. The future continues existing, but now as direction. It stops being the only important point. You plan, but you do not absent yourself. You imagine, but continue perceiving. There exists a maturity in this, that of understanding that life she does not start when everything resolves itself. She continues even while everything is in the open. Perhaps this be the change most profound, not trying anymore to arrive in an ideal moment, but perceiving that each moment already is part of the experience, and nothing needs to be extraordinary, nothing needs to be definitive. Just being already is sufficient. And when this sensation she appears, the time, it stops being something that escapes and passes to be something that reveals itself one instant at a time, not all the time, and not in a constant way, but in small moments. You perceive that you are not waiting so much anymore, that you do not feel that necessity that something needs to change first, because there exists already a kind of silent acceptance of what is happening. And this is not conformism. It is not giving up on improving. It is just stopping postponing experience until everything is perfect, because perhaps it never will be. Life, she does not organize itself completely, she continues in movement. Always there is going to be something uncertain, something incomplete, something that still was not resolved, and yet you are here. And there exists a certain tranquility in this, a sensation that it is not necessary to run so much that you are not going to need to reach this specific point to start living with more presence. The mind, she starts to decelerate, not because you force this, but because there is not so much anymore that urgency. Before always there was a kind of invisible line on the horizon, a moment in which everything would make more sense, a point where finally you would be ready. But then with time you perceive that this line she always shifts, and that perhaps she never had been the most important. The most important always was here on the way, and this does not resume itself to a pretty phrase, but yes, to a concrete experience, with the sound of the environment, the breathing happening, the body moving, the simple details. Nothing of this depends on the future. Nothing of this needs to wait. There exists a change very subtle when you perceive this. You continue planning, continue building, continue imagining, but the weight, it disappears. The future, it stops being a promise and passes to be just a possibility. And this opens space for something much lighter, a relation that is different with time. You do not feel anymore that you are late. Do not feel that the life still has not started. Do not feel that you need to arrive in some place to finally live. There exists only a continuous flow, without a marked beginning, without definitive point. And this does not take from you the sense of things. On the contrary, when you are not waiting anymore, each moment gains more presence. The coffee, it is not just an interval. The path is not just a displacement. The silence, it is not just any more the vacuum. Everything starts to have more density, not because it changed, but because you stopped living only for after. There exists a phrase that says that the miracle is not walking over the water. The miracle for us, human beings, is walking over the earth. That is, it is not living something extraordinary and perceiving what already is happening. And this perception does not demand a constant effort. It appears, disappears. It returns, gets lost. But each time that it emerges, it leaves something, a silent memory that the life she is not in the future and never was. In fact, the future is just an idea, a direction, a constructed image. The experience, she only exists now. And this is not a definitive conclusion. It is not any closed answer. It is just a change of look. You continue walking, you continue imagining, continue building, but without postponing the moment, without waiting for the ideal day, without needing to arrive first, because in the depth, the future never arrives. It always transforms in this instant, and perhaps be this that we were looking for the whole time. It is not a perfect moment, it is not a tranquil phase, but this perception, simple, that living does not happen after, happens now. Well, if this flow of thought, it made sense for you, I invite you to share your vision here in the comments, your perception about the time, about your day-to-day, about your experience of living this process. And in case you still are not subscribed to the channel, I invite you to be part of this community.